Hi, everyone, and welcome to our Prenatal Wellness Talks. Today, I'm joined by Elizabeth Carman, and we'll be talking about something which is very important and very dear to me, prenatal memories and prenatal consciousness. Hi, Elizabeth. Thank you so much for joining us today.
I appreciate this opportunity. I'm always happy to share this wonderful topic with whoever wants to listen.
Let the audience know a little bit about yourself, your work. I know that it's very extensive, but tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, if we had gone back to when I was 10 years old and you said, "What do you want to do when you grow up?" I would have said, "A psychiatrist." What? I really wanted to help people. I wanted to do something in the world to make a difference. And not just physically, but behaviorally, emotionally, whatever I could do. And so I studied a lot of psychology and looked for answers there. I worked as a social worker with single mothers who were in poverty. I worked with foster children, the adopted children, all of these very tough problems in society. And I found that what I had been trained to do wasn't really solving anyone's problems. And about 35 years ago, I discovered what we're going to talk about today. And this is an answer that really satisfies me on many levels, to have this information and to share it with others. So I've written 3 books with my husband, a co-author, and we are just committed and excited about this information. It's the truth about who we are. We are, even as babies before birth, we are conscious, eternal beings, spiritual beings at our core. And this has been a subject that has not been properly understood or disseminated within the mainstream.
Let's go for it. Can you explain us what is pre-birth communication and why it matters for expecting parents and even for maternal health professionals and society as a whole?
It is a very key component. All parents should know about pre-birth communications, preconception communications. These communications can take place at birth between the mother and the incoming baby, or the medical professionals also. We have stories of that. It can happen during pregnancy. It can happen before conception. That's amazing. How could it happen then? Well, we are spiritual beings. We are souls taking incarnation into this fleshy body. And so when we recognize the truth of who we are, that we are truly more than this physical matter, then we can start solving problems which on the surface can't be solved. And one issue here, I'll share some other pre-birth communications as we go on, but one I would like to share in the beginning, for example, the problem of parents who become pregnant and they're really not ready to have a child at that moment. It's going to be not working for many different reasons, an unplanned pregnancy. So what are the mother's options in that case? In many cases, she might go for an abortion, excuse me, maybe an adoption, but many cases we have abortions. And I'd like to share an example of how one woman went beyond that and solved the situation in a much more effective way. And that's one of the first women that I interviewed many years ago who had become pregnant. She was she already had one child. She was in school. Her marriage was a little rocky, wasn't quite sure about that. And they were living in very cramped situation in a small apartment. And so to bring in another child, all of these conditions were not favorable at that moment. But yet she felt she realized that this was a special child. She was sensitive to it, intuitive to it, communicating with it actually, and decided to have a heart-to-heart talk with the child and explain the situation. So she went into her backyard and brought her little journal, and and felt the presence of the child, the awareness of the child, as if she's talking to a friend, and started to explain that she really would like to be her mother, but this isn't the best time. And that there were 3 conditions she would like to see fulfilled before she had this child, and wanted the child to come back at a later time. So she wrote in her journal, number 1, I want to complete my education. Number 2, our marriage needs time to heal. Number 3, we need to move into a larger living space so we're all comfortable. She wrote those down and was sitting in the backyard. This is a summer day, and believe it or not, it's like an unbelievable part of the story. A bumblebee came and landed on her journal and walked up and down each of the 3 conditions she had written there. And she was just in awe of the whole experience. She said, well, I hope he knows her. I hope he delivers the message. But it definitely was a message sent and a message received. It was sent in love. It was respected. And the next morning, her menstrual cycle started. She had a miscarriage. And a year later, she got pregnant again. All those conditions had been fulfilled, and she felt that the same child came back.
Wow.
So that's
What
a wonderful way.
what a beautiful testimony.
And there are other testimonies like this. Sometimes the child might come back to another mother and even report at some time when, her mother's friend, for example, well, I was in your tummy once. What? And anyway, so there's stories like that in our book too.
In one of your books, Cosmic Cradle explores the spiritual dimensions before birth. So what inspired you to write it?
Well, that's a real interesting question because it wasn't planned out at all. It was all serendipity. I was taking a magazine writing class and decided to write about women giving birth without pain. I thought that would be an interesting research topic. And I started interviewing women and hearing the most amazing experiences. And here's another one I can share about pre-birth communications. In this case, it's preconception communications. And there was a mother of 2 children, and she and her husband had decided that's all the children they want. And they took a little reprieve from the worldly life and decided to go on a meditation retreat for a week or 2. And she would have the experience of meditating with a very large group of other women, and her husband would be meditating with some men. And so they would be a good way to just chill for a while. So she went to this meditation, and she started to get messages as she's sitting in her meditation, trying to meditate. She's getting messages. We want you for a mommy. What a good mommy you would make. And she thought, what? I don't want any more kids. Please, not now. We're all set. We've got two children. We're happy. And here's plenty of women around me here. I'm sure one of them would love to have a child. And for 5 days, she kept getting these messages. And at one point, she opened her eyes into the room and could see in the room the most beautiful vision of these, she called them soul bubbles. They were about 2.5 inches in diameter with a pearlescent sheen and a beautiful face of like a cherub with little golden locks, curly locks, and big blue eyes and pink cheeks. And they were just pulling on her heart. They were just so beautiful, and they were all over the room, thousands of them. And she said, no. She kept saying no. There was nothing was, even though it was very appealing to her and a beautiful invitation, no. Finally, they said, 5 days of this, okay, you can't have one of us. We're going away. And she said, no, please. I changed my mind. I'll come back. I'll have one. And she said, that night at dinner, she had never broached this topic, what was happening in her meditation, to her husband. And he said, I've been thinking maybe it's time to have a 3rd child. And she thought, what is he talking about? Anyway, he didn't have the strong experience she had, but I think somebody was whispering in his ear also. So a year later, she did have her third child and was very happy.
Wow.
It's just preconception communication. And when I shared that with Neil at that time, and he's now my husband, but at that time he was a friend, and I was explaining what stories I was finding, and I shared this type of story, and he said, Elizabeth, this is not a magazine article, because that's my intention at that point. I was going to go that way. He said, this is a book or a series of books. This is an untold cosmic topic that people haven't heard about this. And I thought, well, he says, I'm just, I'm absolutely convinced this is the reality. And I thought, well, okay, fine. You had a wonderful vision of the future. We'll see what happens. I was enjoying interviewing these women. These stories were absolutely fascinating. So I kept collecting stories, and before you know it, it is a book.
Yeah, and it's a series of books, and I think we could just have an interview with just the stories that you have witnessed and that moms and couples have shared with you. There's another thing that it's very dear to our audience, which is the bond between mother and baby, between parents and the child. And how do you think that these early communications influence this bond after birth?
Well, there's a lot of examples that I could share about that, but one that comes to mind right away is actually where the medical professional is using the pre-birth communication at the time of birth. And this is a story that comes from Dr. Akira Ikagawa, and you may have heard him tell it. I find it to be one of his my favorite story to tell. He is an obstetrician who has delivered many babies, and in some cases he needed to use forceps. And he didn't like to do that. The babies, usually, I would say 100% of the time, were quite traumatized and crying a lot afterward. And he became familiar with pre and perinatal psychology and realized how conscious the baby was, and decided that he was going to approach differently and ask the baby permission and talk to the baby about what had to be done to bring the baby safely into this world, and that nobody's trying to hurt the baby. We're going to use these forceps on your head. It's going to hurt a little bit, but it'll be over before you know it. That kind of thing. Just heart-to-heart talk about the situation. So the first time he did that, the baby was completely calm and peaceful, no crying. He thought, wow, this is amazing. It was so fulfilling for him. And the baby was not apparently traumatized. Now, what's interesting part of the story is 3 years later, this little baby now is 3 years old, and his mother is going to have another child, his baby brother. And he's with his father in the waiting room while Mama is in with the doctor. And with a big smile on his face, he's playing with his dad. With a big smile on his face, he says, Daddy, Daddy, and I want to be born again. And he put his head under his daddy's shirt. He just got in under there. Pull my head, pull my head, pull my head. So he wanted to relive his story, which was done in such a compassionate way with the forceps. He had no imprint of anything. He thought that's the way it's done. And it hurts a little bit, but it's over, and everybody loves me, and I'm okay.
Yeah,
So
that's such a great way to use this this knowledge about the consciousness of babies to the work of Dr. Akira Kigawa. He's a very dear friend of us, of Prenatal Alliance, and
yes.
his institution is also part of our partners. It's amazing the work that he's doing in Japan, but not only in Japan, around the world, by spreading also this awareness.
Yes, yes. We have personally met him at 2 different conferences here in the United States, and we really have a sweet spot in our hearts for Dr. Kagawa and everything he's doing.
And for parents that are new in this concept, how can parents begin to connect and communicate with their babies before birth?
Well, they're in the ideal position to be communicators, and it's very easy and simple. It's just that people aren't familiar with the idea, and once they hear about it, they realize how easy it is. what babies want to know is, am I loved? Am I wanted? Am I safe? And so we can tell the baby during the pregnancy, the mother could sit with her hands on her belly and start talking out loud, or even in her mind. Thank you for choosing me to be your mother. Thank you for joining our family. I love you. We're looking forward to meeting you. All these kinds of sweet nothings we could say. We could just pour our heart out. Or we could even say, please forgive me for something that had happened. You know, I didn't mean for that to happen, if there had been something stressful, and try to work that out. Now, let me just share a story of a woman who had a breech. Her baby went breech about 7.5 months into the pregnancy. And she already had a son and was hoping, expecting, kind of dreaming that, oh, I'll have a daughter this time. And so it was at the back of her mind. And the baby was breech, and she was trying everything, doing inversions and trying to get the baby to reposition in the proper way for a natural delivery. And nothing worked. And then it dawned on her. She said, oh my gosh, maybe the baby realizes I'm expecting a girl, I'm wanting a girl, and it's a boy, and he's afraid to come out, and he's kind of hanging in there and saying, no, I'm not going out there. They won't like me. So she decided to have a conversation with the little baby and said, I'm looking forward to meeting you. I've been hoping for a little girl, but I'm going to be happy with a little boy. If you're a little boy or a little girl, it's okay with me, and I'm looking forward to it, and I'm going to love you no matter what. And that night, the baby turned, and she had a natural vaginal delivery. And so there's a beautiful effect of these communications and how they can turn things around, that, you know, other options are not so good if we don't honor this true reality of who we are. Did I answer your question okay?
Yes, definitely. And one of the things that I would also like to ask you, you have been on this field for over 30 years. Some people are listening to this for the first time. What are some of the common challenges or misconceptions that you have faced exploring this pre-birth communication topic?
Well, the difficulty is that it's so new and foreign to people, and people are kind of entrenched in another paradigm that babies aren't conscious, that that they don't have a fully developed brain. So it's an emphasis on matter, physical matter being the basis of who we are, whereas we are beyond the limits of body and brain. And a story that illustrates this comes from Dr. William Emerson, who's a trauma specialist, birth trauma specialist. And when his wife was pregnant, she needed to have an ultrasound. And he was fully aware of the conscious baby and had been communicating with the baby in the womb and felt a connection. And they went in, and on the ultrasound screen, there is a baby just lying there flat, looking lifeless. And he was kind of surprised. He thought there might be some activity going on in there. So he said to the nurse, he said, do you think my baby is conscious? And she put her hands on her hips and said, she looked at him as if he was the most stupid person in the world and said, well, of course not. They don't even have a brain yet at that age. And this was I can't remember the exact age, but the baby at that time was like 2.5 inches in size. So yeah, he doesn't have a fully developed brain. But anyway, what happened is, as the process went along, the doctor and the nurse left the room. And as soon as they left the room, the baby stood up. He just has little arm buds, and he's tiny. And he does 3 slow somersaults. And his mother and father are just staring at the screen, wondering, wow, what's going on here? Then he does a little bow to them as if, hi, Mom and Dad, everything's fine. Don't worry, we don't need an ultrasound, but you're checking up and everything's okay with me and it's going to all be fine. Then the doctors came back in, boom, he went right down. He looked like a dead piece of meat, just nothing. And Dr. Emerson said that the baby respected, that baby was aware of who he could be real with. He knew, he was aware that these were skeptical people who would never. So it just shows the consciousness. It's just beyond our ability to comprehend sometime, because we've been so brainwashed by John Locke and the blank slate theory, and Freud, infantile amnesia, children don't remember anything before the age of 3. All these ideas have been implanted in our educational system. And so this is the challenge. Like the nurse said to him, of course, he's not conscious. He doesn't have a brain yet. So these are the things, I'd say this is the major issue to deal with, to educate people with the proper evidence and research.
Yes, and one thing that I would like to say is that a lot of these stories, in terms of how babies as early as the age of 3 or 4 remember their time in the womb, or as adults that now share the stories of remembering how it was to be in their mommy's belly, but also they also share stories about conception and preconception. And these are stories that they could not have known. So these are stories that are only corroborated by the parents saying, there's no way that you could have known how the conception happened, or the times even before conception. So it's not just that they are saying and they are remembering. There is a way that we can also acknowledge that what they are remembering, it happened.
Those are the best cases, the validation. Also, the children, we look at other signs too. Are they repeating the same story over and over, which is a sign that it's a true story. They aren't fantasizing and making up something different every day. And they have a very serious tone of voice. They almost become adults, immature in telling. Their whole demeanor shifts. And it's very spontaneous. I always look for the most spontaneous experiences. Of course, you can ask your children, you remember being in mommy's tummy, and that might elicit something, but you don't want to put words in the child's mouth. But I always look for those stories that surprised the parents. They had no idea such was possible. And the child might be talking about being with God and the angels and things like, and using the word heaven. And this is an agnostic family. They don't talk about that. They don't go to church. Where did this child hear these things? So there's many things that indicate that these children are authentic. They're not fabricating. And they're speaking this out from the time they start talking.
So our conversation is running, and I would like you to ask you, Elizabeth, if you could leave a message to parents and maternal health professionals regarding everything that we have been talking about here.
Well, one important thing to remember is that it's never too early or never too late to have these conversations. And sometimes things might not be ideal in a relationship with a child, and we realize that, whoops, maybe I remember one case that Dr. Wendy McCarty shares, where the father, they already had 3 children, and the father was absolutely angry when the mother, his wife, became pregnant with the 4th child, and he just completely ignored the pregnancy and got involved in his work. And when the child was born, from the time she's 2 years old, that the relationship never clicked. There was some roughness there. So he took one of Dr. McCarty's workshops and realized that his daughter had tuned into what he was feeling, and that needed to be resolved. And so Dr. McCarty recommends authentic communication, telling the child exactly what was going on. And so he sat down with this 2-year-old child and explained that when you came into mommy's tummy, I was angry. We weren't ready for another child, but now I really love you. You're a beautiful child, and I'm so sorry that I didn't honor you, and I should have honored you. I'm your father, and I'm so happy to have you as my daughter. And he went on like that with the little 2-year-old, and the 2-year-old, anyway, the next day, everything changed. It was a whole new reality. When the child got up and saw the father, she went running into the father's arms with a big hug. He said, this experience, this conversation changed my child's life, changed my life, changed the whole family life. And he and his wife met with Dr. McCarty and were just in tears, months later. It was a permanent change. So these healings can take place because we don't know all the answers. Maybe we don't realize that the baby is sensitive when we're carrying them during the pregnancy, and they're picking up on all kinds of things. They know when they're wanted and unwanted. We call it love sensing. That's one of their secret signs of intelligence.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Elizabeth. It was such a pleasure to have you with us.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.